There are cases that leave an echo long after they end, stories that make people stop whatever they are doing and lean closer because something about the details does not feel real. This one begins with a single phone call to emergency dispatch on a quiet evening in Crescent Falls. A young woman's voice, trembling and barely audible, whispers that someone is following her. You can hear her breath shaking as she tells the operator that she thinks it is her ex-partner and that he is not supposed to be near her. Before the operator can ask another question, the line fills with a sudden sharp scream, followed by silence. That moment, captured in the dispatch recording, would later become the beginning of one of the most heartbreaking cases the community had ever seen. The disappearance and tragic death of a young woman named Amara Hills. Her story would expose a pattern of deception, manipulation, and failure that left everyone asking how it was allowed to happen. Crescent Falls was known as a peaceful lakeside town. People fished on weekends, families held picnics near the water, and everyone believed they lived in a safe and predictable place. Amara Hills embodied the bright and hopeful spirit the town was proud of. She was 22 years old, a student at Alton Ridge University studying veterinary medicine, driven by her deep love for animals and her dream of opening a shelter someday. Friends described her as warm and uplifting with a smile that made people feel seen. She was also known for being incredibly trusting, something that would later become a painful detail in her story. Amara met a man named Jonah Pierce in the campus gym. He appeared shy, respectful, and attentive in a way that made her feel safe. He told her he was 24 years old, recently moved to town, and working as a personal trainer. Their relationship developed with an intensity that surprised even Amara, but she allowed herself to enjoy the excitement of being loved. Friends noticed she started spending more time with Jonah, fewer evenings out, and more nights at home with him. They assumed it was simply new relationship bliss. What no one knew was that Jonah had constructed an impressive facade built entirely on lies. As the weeks passed, Jonah began asking Amara more personal questions about her schedule and routines. He convinced her to download a location-sharing app so he could make sure she got home safely, something he framed as protective but that later revealed a darker purpose. He began encouraging her to distance herself from certain friends he claimed were a bad influence. He also told her that her family did not appreciate her enough and that she should focus on people who truly understood her. These behaviors grew slowly, quietly, and in ways that were easy to overlook until they became controlling. Everything changed the day Amara discovered Jonah's real identity. One afternoon, she forgot her water bottle in his car. When she returned to his place to retrieve it, she noticed his wallet left on the coffee table with an identification card she had never seen before. The name was not Jonah Pierce. The age was not 24. And his address was not in Crescent Falls. She stared at it in disbelief as confusion and fear filled her chest. When she confronted him later that evening, he reacted with explosive anger, insisting she was overreacting and accusing her of snooping through his belongings. He stormed out of the apartment, and for the first time Amara felt genuinely afraid of him. The next day, she reached out to authorities and learned that the name on the card belonged to a man with a long history of charges related to stalking and domestic violence in other towns. She sat in the parking lot gripping her steering wheel with shaky hands, realizing she had been living with someone completely different from who he claimed to be. She immediately ended the relationship and blocked him on every platform. Her friends said she seemed relieved but also unnervingly paranoid, checking over her shoulder more often and avoiding walking alone at night. A protection order was filed shortly after. But it did not stop Jonah. Only days later, Amara began receiving strange texts from unfamiliar numbers. They were short, taunting, and frightening enough to make her fear every sound outside her window. She reported the messages multiple times, but officers said there was not enough proof to tie them directly to Jonah. Some nights she would sleep at a friend's apartment, other nights she would text her roommate begging her to come home early because she felt unsafe by herself. On the night she disappeared, she had been walking home from a late study session when she noticed someone following her. She moved faster, but the footsteps behind her sped up too. She called emergency dispatch and her voice cracked as she said she suspected it was Jonah. Halfway through the call, the operator asked her if she could see the person. She whispered yes. The operator asked her to describe what he looked like. But before she could answer, the phone emitted a loud scuffle and then a terrified scream. After that came nothing. Officers were dispatched immediately, but by the time they arrived at the location, Amara was gone. Investigators believe that after the phone call, Jonah grabbed Amara and forced her into an old sedan he had borrowed using a fake name. Based on tire tracks, witness reports, and later recovered footage from nearby cameras, they were able to piece together the timeline. He drove her to an abandoned cabin near the outskirts of Crescent Falls, a place hidden behind tall trees and rarely visited. Evidence later revealed that Jonah had been watching her for weeks, taking note of her walking routes and studying her patterns. Everything pointed to a premeditated attack. Inside the cabin, the floor showed signs of struggle. Blood spatter analysis later indicated that Amara had fought back, using anything she could find to defend herself. The tragic reality is that she was trapped with someone who had carefully studied how to control and isolate her. What happened inside those walls remains partly unknown, but investigators believed the confrontation escalated quickly. The final blow that took her life was delivered within an hour of her abduction. For 2 days she remained missing. Her family pleaded through social media, news outlets circulated her photo nonstop, and volunteers searched through forests and trails hoping for any sign of her. The entire community came together, their anxiety rising each hour she remained unfound. The truth was that she was already gone by the first night and hidden in a shallow grave behind the cabin, a heartbreaking discovery investigators would later make after tracing Jonah's movements using cell tower pings. Detectives began their work immediately after Amara's disappearance. The first major break came from campus security, who found footage of a car matching the description given by a neighbor who saw a vehicle speeding away on the night Amara vanished. Although the license plate was not fully visible, investigators were able to enhance certain frames and eventually match the make and model to a rental car company. The rental agreement was signed under a false name, but the identification used was the same card Amara had found weeks earlier in his apartment. Next, detectives began looking into Jonah's previous residences and discovered a disturbing pattern of behavior. Neighbors from his last town said he had been involved with another woman who also reported being stalked by him after ending their relationship. Authorities there had attempted to locate him after he failed to appear for a hearing, but by then he had already left town. It became clear that Jonah was someone who reinvented himself repeatedly, using false identities to create new relationships and escape consequences. As news spread that he was the primary suspect, tips came flooding in. Someone reported seeing him purchasing supplies at a hardware store days before Amara disappeared. Another person said they saw him watching her from a distance outside her classroom building a week earlier. Each tip strengthened the case, painting a picture of a man who had been preparing for something for a long time. Detectives obtained a search warrant for Jonah's small apartment. Inside they found notes containing Amara's daily routines, hand-drawn maps of campus, and a notebook filled with disturbing entries written as if he believed Amara belonged to him. The evidence made it clear that this was not a sudden act of rage but a carefully planned abduction. The final breakthrough came when investigators looked at cell tower data. Jonah had turned off his phone during the night of the attack, but what he did not realize was that his device still connected briefly to a tower near the outskirts of town at around the same time Amara disappeared. That tower was located near the old abandoned cabin. When officers searched the area, they found the tire tracks that matched the rental vehicle and eventually discovered the disturbed soil behind the cabin that led them to Amara. The discovery devastated the community. People who had held onto hope now faced the painful truth. Her family was informed, and the moment became one of the most heartbreaking scenes in the entire investigation. Volunteers cried and hugged each other, unable to comprehend how someone could harm a person so loved and so full of promise. Jonah was arrested 3 days later in a neighboring town after attempting to flee. When officers approached him, he offered little resistance. He refused to answer any questions, sitting silently with a blank expression that made investigators uneasy. During the trial, he showed no remorse. Prosecutors presented the mountain of evidence against him, including surveillance footage, the notebook, the cell data, and the items recovered from the cabin. The jury deliberated for only a few hours before returning a guilty verdict on all charges, including kidnapping, premeditated murder, and violating a protective order. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the sentencing hearing, Amara's mother stood in front of him and spoke about her daughter's kindness, her dreams, and the pain of never hearing her laugh again. Her voice cracked as she said that no sentence would ever undo the damage he caused, but she hoped the justice system ensured he could never hurt anyone else. Many people in the courtroom cried along with her. Even the judge paused before speaking, overwhelmed by the emotional weight of the case. The community of Crescent Falls created a memorial near the lake where Amara used to sit and study. People placed flowers, photos, candles, and handwritten notes expressing their sorrow and love. Her friends organized an annual awareness event to educate others about recognizing signs of manipulation and control in relationships. Local lawmakers pushed for stronger protective measures for victims who report stalking and harassment. Amara's case became a catalyst for change, a story that forced people to examine how someone could fall through the cracks so easily. Amara Hills was a bright, loving young woman with dreams that were stolen far too soon. Her story is painful but also important. It reminds everyone that danger does not always come from the shadows. Sometimes it comes from someone who smiles, someone who pretends to care, someone who hides their true nature behind a mask of charm and gentleness. Amara did everything right. She reported the threats. She asked for help. She tried to protect herself. The system simply failed to shield her from someone determined to cause harm. As we reflect on her story, it becomes clear that awareness and early intervention can save lives. Everyone deserves to feel safe in their relationships and in their communities. And while nothing can undo what happened to Amara, sharing her story ensures that her voice lives on, echoing through each person who listens and learns. Her life will always matter. Her memory will always inspire change. And her story will continue to remind people that love should never come with fear.
This is True Crime Moment, where real crime gives real chills.